So I think we are live. Yes, we're live. I'm here with my new friend Bruce. Bruce, how you doing?
Doing great, doing great. Thank you. Thanks
Let me
for
take it.
letting me
Let
come
me take
on.
a stab at your last name. Wawrzyniak. Wawrzyniak?
Oh, that is awfully, awfully, awfully close. Wow, I'm so happy.
What? How do you
It
say it?
it's Wawrzyniak,
Wawrzyniak.
and funny enough, a lot of people not only mispronounce it, but get so tripped up that they start adding SKI at the end. 'Cause they see this big long Polish last name and they're like, Wawrzyński, and I'm like, "All right, you know what? I knew you weren't gonna say it right, but when you start throwing extra letters on there, there's already enough that shouldn't be in there to begin with." But
It's amazing. I snuck into Poland with my wife across the border. We walked across the German-Polish border, and we didn't have any money or anything, and they were just like they detained us at the border. Like, what are you doing? And we explained, well, we're on our honeymoon. Well, what's the matter? This is how we did our honeymoon, just hitchhiking around Europe with no money. So they let us go, but
what are you doing? We're doing this little thing, maybe you've heard of it. It's called sightseeing.
we went. Well, they wouldn't believe that because we went to Poznan of all places, which is not very good for sightseeing. I don't know if you've been to Poznan or not, but rough town.
Have not. No.
It's a rough town. But there's some beautiful what do they call them, squares or plazas or piazzas or whatever in
Mhm.
Poland. That's one thing I did notice is they have very grand squares and open spaces and nice architecture in the nice parts, and then in the not so nice parts, it's it's pretty depressing. But have you been to Poland?
Unfortunately not, but you know that it's on my proverbial
Oh yeah,
bucket list.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting. I guess they're like kind of like based patriots over there. A lot of Catholic sort of old school
Yeah,
Catholic vibes, which is good and bad. It's good and bad. I
yeah,
like the
for sure.
Catholic part. I'm not sure if I like the sort of conservative part, but it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. So before we get into you and what you're doing today, I'd like you to walk us through the faith journey. Like, I don't know that much about you. How were you raised, and were there any ups and downs on your journey? How did you first discover there's God and religion? Go way back, right to the childhood, and sort of talk about it if you would, the family situation and all that good stuff.
I'm laughing because I'm finally on the receiving end of this question. Every week on my podcast, that's the first question I ask every guest is, "Where were you born and raised, and what was the family size?" I sometimes will blend in, what you're asking me, the Catholic faith, or I'll make that question number 2. And so now to be on the receiving end of going, "Oh, this is what it feels like, huh?"
No
So
pressure, no
anyhow,
pressure.
cradle Catholic and very traditional looking Catholic family. We went to church every Sunday, and it was just kind of automatic. It wasn't something that you stopped. And of course, when you're a wee little boy, you don't question what your parents are getting you into doing as a ritual, going to mass every Sunday. So because of that, and because of going to Catholic school for kindergarten through and including 8th grade, it was just kind of ingrained in us that that's who we were. My father came from a Catholic family, my mother came from a Catholic family, so there was never any question about the Catholic faith or about continuing with it. And so I have that kind of traditional Catholic story of just walking through the faith my whole life and never questioning any of the teachings, never wondering if any of the other ones were something that I should look into in terms of would I want to go and pursue those. And it's kind of that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, because I was always so happy and so comfortable in the Catholic faith, and it always gave me everything that I wanted, that there really would have been no reason for me to question it anyways.
You should become a Scientologist just to see what it's like on the other side. Just kidding.
Well, I live in Tampa, Florida, and they always say that Clearwater is kind of the epicenter
Oh.
of Scientology and where that all emanates from. So you're talking like an hour drive for
Ah.
me. And I've literally walked down the street in some of the places where they do try to, and they'll disguise it, like, hey, come on in here and it's, a palm reading, a tarot card set, whatever it is. And in reality, they want to just do the full on sales pitch. And I've gotten to see enough of them by now that I see them a mile away and, walk down the street looking in the complete other direction or really into my phone.
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah, I've tried, I've tried to get them on my podcast because I interview all kinds of people, atheists and Buddhists, Hindus, even Protestants. A lot of Protestants. But yeah, people are interesting. A lot of people like to stereotype and say, "Oh, if you're Catholic, then you're this." But I've met such a spectrum of people who claim to be Catholic. Some of them I would agree, yeah, you're Catholic. Some of them not so sure. But with your podcast, do you I don't want to get too deep in the podcast because I want to go back and ask more biographical questions. But with the podcast, do you primarily interview Catholics or non-Catholics or what?
Only Catholics. Only
Okay.
Catholics.
Okay.
My show is Catholic Sports Radio, and it's because I have been doing a music podcast since February of 2014. And so along that podcasting journey, I learned that the more niched down your show is, the better. So I thought, well, I've always only been Catholic my whole life. And I spent years and years and years working in sports. So here's a couple of things that have really been a part of me for so long. And then podcasting, which I've done forever. And there's a whole story that I'd love to tell you if you want to hear it about how I got this call, I got the call to do Catholic Sports Radio.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just a natural fit, because like I said, I was a cradle Catholic and I had so much involvement in sports. And here I was with all this podcasting gear and all this podcasting experience. When the Lord calls you to serve in that way, how do you say, I don't think so?
Well, I've got a guest for you. You should definitely hit him up. I'm on Twitter right now. I'm trying to find out his actual name. Dr. Brian Duncan. You're going to want to find him at CatholicFightwear.com. And he makes the clothing for MMA fighters, like Catholic clothing for the MMA. And I love the MMA, so I'm going to interview him tomorrow night.
Awesome.
If you like, do you like combat sports at all?
I like boxing, I suppose. I mean, I don't go out of my way to look for it, but I also don't turn away from boxing. MMA for whatever reason has just never done it for me. Okay. That doesn't mean that I have bad things to say about it. It's just never been my thing.
Yeah. What's your big sport that you love?
Well,
don't say hockey. Don't say hockey.
Oh gosh, I guess the interview's over then. Yeah, it was ice hockey growing up, and then I got to work for an NHL team for 10 seasons.
And then, which team?
Buffalo Sabres.
That's cool.
Although I am a very, 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 very devoted, very passionate Tampa Bay Lightning fan, to the point where I look at the Sabres as a division rival, just like Boston and Montreal and Toronto and everyone else in our division. And it's funny because there's someone that I worked with at the Sabres who, I've been living in Tampa for so long that there was a point in time where I told him, what a devoted Tampa Bay Lightning fan I am. And he was shocked because here we had worked together for Buffalo. And he said, Sabres and Lightning meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. Who are you rooting for? And I said, Tampa Bay. And he says, oh my gosh, you didn't even have to think about it. And I said, no, I'm all about the Lightning. I'm all about the Lightning.
How old is that team?
Oh gosh, they've been here for 30 years.
Because I'd never heard about them till today.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because hockey really kind of led me into lacrosse, indoor lacrosse, but now I also still do broadcasting for the University of Tampa, which is field lacrosse, which is, people who don't know about the game might call it outdoor lacrosse. But I also spent 10 and a half years working in the Olympic movement and specifically with softball. So people might say, well, what is your sport? Is it hockey? Is it lacrosse? Is it softball? And, I'll sit down and watch just about anything, but those are the three that I've worked in throughout my career.
Have you ever tried to get into the Australian footy, football, rugby, the different sports they have? They're really wild.
No, I haven't. It's interesting because when I worked in the Olympic movement, there was, all kinds of drama that was going on, that women's softball was being dropped from the Olympic program. And one of the sports that was coming in was rugby. And it's always kind of funny that I would travel around the world and we would find people that didn't know what softball was, which to us as Americans was really strange. And yet there's something like rugby, there's something like cricket, that people in the United States, we don't know what those sports are. And so to them, it's strange. How could you not know what cricket is? And I go, well, how do you not know what softball is? So, some of these other sports that are really big, like you say, Australian rules football or rugby or things like that. I don't want to say they're regional, but they just don't have the penetration and other with the possible exception of soccer. I mean, what sport really does? When I worked in softball, we were in 125 countries, which sounds like a lot until you find out that, there's like 202 countries in the Olympic movement. So, there's 77 that don't have softball, or at least, this was, 10, 11 years ago that I was last working with them.
My favorite sport, forgive me for stretching the use of this word sport, but my favorite sport to watch is snooker. Do you watch snooker?
Snooker is a card game, is it not?
No, it's billiards with the huge table.
Oh, okay.
It's a billiards game. It's a cue sport. They call it a cue sport, like pool, billiards, and snooker. But it's a huge table, and it's very, very popular in my my heritage is English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh. Like that's my genetic makeup, allegedly, and I've been tested multiple times. I believe it. I do believe it. But yeah, it's very, very big there. Some Asians are very good at snooker, but it's primarily the English and British Isles. Right now, there's a Belgian guy. He's impressing me. I'm watching the finals now, and I used to live in Belgium. I used to live in England with my wife, and we traveled around. Like I said, we traveled around. So yeah, everything that's English, I kind of tend to like. When the culture and even the food. I like the food too. Have you been to England?
Interesting. Sorry?
Have you been to England?
I was just in the UK in, what was it, August of last year, and I was speaking at the 3rd Global Congress on Sport and Christianity.
Cool. Well, I was going to mention, there are a lot of Catholics in boxing. There are a lot of Catholics in MMA. They're Catholics everywhere. I mean, frankly, but how do you find the representation, Christian or Catholic, in the sports that you follow most heavily?
It's funny you asked that because I had a guest on recently who off air said there don't seem to be as many Catholic hockey players, or at least those that are outward with their Catholic faith. And I have asked a guest or two on my podcast, why do you think that there are so many in baseball? Because baseball is a sport where I feel like I have found a lot. Now, boxing, I've had Baby Joe Macy. He was an undefeated heavyweight boxer. He was on my podcast, and so was Jerry Cooney. Everybody's heard of Jerry Cooney. And so, there have been a few people from the combat sports, but yeah, I think, I have accused myself of being a little too over analytical of the guests that I'm getting, because I'll look and I'll say, gee, I've had 4 weeks in a row where the guest was male, or gee, I've had 3 of the 4 guests have been from baseball, and 1 or 2 people have told me, like, Bruce, nobody's paying attention other than you. Like nobody's realizing that you think you're falling into a pattern. Like, we're just interested in hearing everybody's testimony and what everybody's story is and what their faith walk is. And as my podcast goes, what their intersection of faith and sports is for them. So stop overthinking the demographic of who you're talking to from 1 week to the next.
Yeah, you really need an African American woman in a wheelchair. That's what you need, Bruce. That's what you need. Preferably transgender, if you want to be trendy. But anyway, I'm just being silly. I'm not trying to offend anyone. But yeah, so I was going to ask you about another sport that I like, which is soccer, or as they call it around the world, football, or whatever they call it. Not American football. I tried to get into that. I didn't get into it. But I really love the greats. Lionel Messi is my favorite. Have you watched him in action?
I've not, and it's ironic because I know he's just 4 hours away from me over in Miami, but I just never took to soccer. And interestingly enough, when I was in 9th grade, I tried out for the soccer team at school. And at the same time that the coach was telling me that he already had me written down as somebody that was going to make the team, I was telling him, I'm done. I'm just not interested. This just doesn't do it for me. And here he was trying to tell me, like, no, you're already on the team. Like, I already have your, and no, I'm done. Goodbye. You're not going to see me coming around soccer anymore. Soccer has just never done it for me.
What is the sport that you like to play? It's going to be different from the ones you like to watch, maybe.
Well, I mean, I'm older now.
I know, but back in the day,
when I was in school, basketball was my sport.
Ah.
That was the one that I played, and I'll still watch NBA. But now I'm disappointed in how sedentary I've become, how unathletic I am, and I can stand here all day and make excuses about how busy I am and that there's no time. But I could look at other people. Look at Tom Brady, played in the NFL until the age of 45. If it's a priority to you and if you enjoy it, if you're good at it, you'll keep doing it.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Well,
what decade are you in? 30s.
I'm going to put it this way. I'm a lot older than people think I am. And I think if people kind of use some context clues and they figure out, well, he said he worked for an NHL team for 10 years and he worked in the Olympic movement for 10 and a half years. And he just said that he hasn't been doing that for 10 years, right? So you start doing all the math and you go, oh, maybe he is older than I think he is.
That's like in the old days, they wouldn't ask a woman or a lady their age. So they just present this card that was a grid of numbers. Oh, you don't need to tell me. Just tell me which row and which column or whatever. There was some trick they did, and it told them exactly how old they were.
Interesting. I remember when I first started my music podcast, I think I was on one of the episodes, like it was episode 20 something. And I asked a female guest, do you mind if I ask your age? And right away she said, it's not polite to ask a woman her age. And so, no, I'm not going to reveal that. And she went off and I thought, okay, I'm going to, and here I am, 9 years later telling you about it. So obviously that made an impression on me. Don't ask a guest their age, or at least a female guest.
Yeah. Well, my style is, I may have some mild form of autism. I don't know, but people tell me that I do. But, my style is very, I don't have tact or diplomacy, generally speaking. Like I'm friendly. I like people. I genuinely love people. I'm excited about them. That's why I do the podcast. But yeah, I can say stupid things and I can ask stupid questions a lot of the time. If you think that was bad, asking you your age, you should hear some of the jokes I've made to some of my. But it's fun. I'm a bit unfiltered. Let's just put it that way, unfiltered. Especially if I'm sick, like I am today. Stuff will come out. So forgive me and use your discretion if you're going to answer or not. So, do you have any partner in crime in terms of the podcast, and do you have a partner in life, romantic partner?
I am married, and my wife helps me when I do my music podcast on location. The overwhelming majority of those interviews are done remotely, like you and I are doing today. But for that podcast, I have opportunities where I go out to events and I'll do a lot of interviews on location. And my wife will help book a lot of those guests for me because it ends up being, let's say like 8 people in 3 days kind of thing. So it does become a little overwhelming for one person. With Catholic Sports Radio, my podcast, that one, it's interesting because she has kind of a Google alert set up for it that she kind of beta tested some different things along the way and finally got it perfected to where when she comes up with somebody for me, more times than not, it's okay, thank you. This is a good one. I'm going to pursue this person, as opposed to when we were first trying it out, it was, and that's the thing. You can't really tell if somebody is Catholic or not. They may appear to be Christian, but as much research as you might try to do, it's not always going to be out there that it's Catholic, that he or she is Catholic. So my wife, when Catholic Sports Radio, when I first told her I've got this idea for this podcast I'm going to do, her initial reaction was, great, I'm going to see less of you. You're so busy, working and doing the other podcast. Now you're going to do this one. And this was basically a ministry for me. So she's saying, you're going to do this other podcast. I'm going to see less of you and you're not even getting any money for doing it. And I said, well, look, I really feel a calling to do it. And let's face it, at some point down the road, I may look for a way to monetize it, but not right out of the gate. I just want to get this thing started. And of course, she supported me and understood, recognized that this was something that I felt compelled to do, and it wasn't just whimsical, and it wasn't, a lot of times I'll joke and I'll tell people, if you're just doing a podcast for a hobby where it's a New York Jets podcast and you and your buddies are talking about what the team did wrong on Sunday and why they should fire the coach and how they're going to do in their next game, that's fine if it makes you happy and if you have the time for it. But this Catholic Sports Radio was not going to be that. It wasn't. And I always say that my podcast is not reporting wins and losses and statistics or things like that. I'm talking with Catholic guests about the intersection of their faith life and their sports life. So there is a purpose, there is a mission, there's kind of a direction that this is going in. It's not just me sitting around doing the same things that ESPN's already doing.
Yeah. Very interesting. How do you deal, I mentioned tact and diplomacy and my lack thereof. How do you deal with someone who has an outlandish, unorthodox set of beliefs and they're trying to say that it's Catholic? How do you deal with that?
I don't know that I've had to face that, because everybody that I book, I know before they come on the show that they are Catholic.
Yeah.
And, it's obviously, as you said, it's going to vary in terms of people who are just absolutely on fire for their faith, to people who, quite frankly, David, I find some people who are, I guess the word would be maybe a little bit more bashful about their faith. They're not as comfortable as others really openly talking about their faith. They will, but it's not going to be as prominent as it is with some other guests. And that's okay, because I recognize that everybody's at a different place in their walk, or they may be so passionate about their sport that they're going, gosh, I hope I can talk more about my sport. He's asking a lot of questions about my faith, which I get that. I'm just trying to make sure that it doesn't become 95% sport and 5% faith, to where the audience is going, oh, I didn't really learn much from this person about their faith life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had a controversial guest on that I met on PodMatch, and she's all about feminism and women's ordination, which is not allowed. It's not. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And I told her my Catholic point of view, but she knows where I stand, and she's hoping that I'll read her books and come around to her point of view, but it's not going to happen. I might read the books, but I'm not going to come around to her point of view. Lovely lady, by the way. But if you had to, you're live on the air and you discover that this Catholic guest of yours has some really strong opinions which are out of line with the teaching of the church, how would you handle it?
Well, fortunately, I'm not live on the air because it's a recorded podcast. So, I think I'd be really moved that internally I'd have this voice saying, I think I may have to just end this interview and not use this and not publish it. But thank you, God, in 248 episodes so far, I've never had anybody that has gotten me to the point where I've thought, I don't even know if this is usable. At worst, it would be, I don't know if this is usable because their audio is so bad, or their answers are so short, or whatever.
The yes, no answers, yes.
Or the opposite, which is their answers are way too long. And
yeah, that's worse. Yeah, that is worse. Yeah. I could see you're giving me, full answers, but in small pieces. I like that. I appreciate that. You obviously have come to appreciate that yourself. But when it comes to the music stuff, and forgive me for hopping around, this is just how I do it. When it comes to your music stuff, what's the motivation for that? You're a music lover, you're a music maker. What's the deal?
That podcast was started because I am a publicist. And so I thought at the time, this was February 2014 that I started that podcast. And at the time, podcasting wasn't what it is now. And I just thought, oh, maybe this will be a great marketing tool. Somebody will be listening in insert city here, and they'll say, oh, this Bruce guy seems to know his stuff. I wonder if he can manage and promote me from across the miles. But I also selfishly was motivated by, I want to do long form, full length feature interviews, because I know that my clients, as I place them into music interviews, when they're getting interviewed for 5, 6, 7 minutes, how much could you really do? And it becomes the same old canned questions. And I'd like to get some questions answered myself and learn more about the music business along the way, so I can anticipate the questions that the audience has, because either I have them myself or the clients have them. And so this is a good forum to kind of provide a platform where there can be some teaching that goes on, where the guest is having success in entertainment, primarily music. And I can say, how did you get your songs placed in film and television? Or how did you get your latest recording project entirely crowdfunded? Or how are you getting booked at such great venues? Because I know that that's what people who are aspiring performers want to hear. And honestly, David, the lesson that I learned along the way is I just make phenomenal contacts, because I'm having such long form conversations with these guests that it's not something where it's 5 or 6 or 7 minutes and 6 months later they already forgot who you were. So I will literally travel for business to Nashville or to Los Angeles or to insert city here, and I will contact people in advance and say, hey, I'm coming to town, let's grab some breakfast, or let's go out to lunch while I'm there. And they go, yeah, great, sure, love to finally meet you in person, Bruce. I go, awesome. Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. I thought you were going to say you want to sleep on their couch, but that would just be me. That would be that would be what I would want. But anyway, so what genre or genres of music have you been involved with primarily?
There's a part of me that wants to say it's easier to tell you the ones that I don't.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I would say the ones that I have gone towards are just kind of the singer-songwriter people,
Okay.
pop music, country music,
Okay.
just kind of mainstream stuff. I don't venture into like hip hop and rap and stuff like that.
And you
Or
decide because you like it, you're gonna pursue it, and
yeah,
if you don't like it, you just don't go there.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, and I have gotten to the point where I've been writing a blog every week on my website for, gosh, I think 9 years now. And along the way, there's a service that started up that said, we would like you to review people's music and write about it on your blog. And I said, well, that's not really what I do. But tell me more, maybe I'll consider it. You can change my mind. And so every once in a while, I'll get a song that I like enough that I say, okay, let's admit it. When you're writing a blog every week for 9 years, you get writer's block a lot of times. So here we go. This week, I'm just going to write about this person's song. But because my name is going to be on it, it has to really move me. So that's why it doesn't happen very often. But it is those ones where your name is going on it and you're writing back to the person. And a lot of times I'm just saying, honestly, like there's nothing, I'm not making a statement about your song. This just isn't my thing. I just don't listen to this kind of music. I don't, or I'll say, I would never put this on my own personal Spotify playlist. So I can't justify writing a positive blog about it. But it doesn't mean it's a bad song. And there's a lot of other people that are going to like it. I wish you had known this in advance, that I don't review that genre. Good luck.
Well, it's funny. Just for a joke, I was going to ask you if you've ever heard of the band Gnidderlog, but you probably haven't. But my wife makes fun of me because like I'm obsessed with early 70s prog rock, and it's like, why, but the reason why is because during my troubled adolescence, that's what I was listening to, and so it's just part of it's part of the soundtrack of my life.
Of
She's like,
course,
oh,
of
it's
course.
depressing. That sounds so dated. It's depressing and whatever. But and it's dark. A lot of the time it's dark. But I like that. I like it. But I actually got to interview this 73-year-old guy. He's a twin. He's a Jewish man. His twin brother. He and his twin brother founded the band Gnidderlog, which is one of my favorite 70s prog rock bands from the UK. And I only discovered them like last year. Because there's a lot of other stuff to discover, and they're a very small group. But I'm telling you this because I'm excited to get to meet one of my heroes, and I'm wondering if
Yeah.
you've met anyone where you were actually a little bit starstruck, like, oh, I love you, I love your music, it's so cool to meet you. Have you ever had that opportunity?
Yeah, I don't think it's been to the level that you're describing, but there have been a few people, that I've interviewed that I admittedly gotten a little nervous about and thought, wow, this person's a big deal. I mean, I recently had my milestone 500th episode, and my guest was Kenny Wayne Shepherd, and I mean, he's a big deal in the blues community. And I found myself, and this was one of those things where it's like somebody else is dialing the phone for him and handing it to him. His PR person is saying he can only give you 30 minutes, and I'm going, well, I need 45. Now that being said, on Catholic Sports Radio, I interviewed Mark Wahlberg, the actor Mark Wahlberg, because Mark is Catholic, and at the time, Mark was promoting Father Stu, which is the movie about, it was a true story.
Great movie.
Yeah, and because that priest had been a boxer, I thought, well, there's the sports angle, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, Mark Wahlberg is always on the cover of all these fitness magazines. Like, he's got the sports angle covered. Not to mention that he had played a boxer in a movie in 2010 called The Fighter. So I was nervous with Mark Wahlberg for sure. I mean, that was kind of a little bit what you're talking about, fangirling over, oh my gosh, it's Mark Wahlberg. Not to mention that, I mean, that was a whole thing in and of itself in the way that they do these press junkets. And so when he came on the screen, like you and I are doing now, ready for me to interview him, I was caught off guard, and like my heart skipped a beat, like, oh my gosh, there's Mark Wahlberg. And it's like, just start asking the questions, Bruce. You don't have time to be nervous. Come on.
Wow. It went well?
It did. That was another case of where, they said you'll get 10 minutes with Mark. And I'm like, when I first am reading this email saying that, I'm thinking, no, my show is like 25 minutes long. 10 minutes is not going to do me any good. And I called up a buddy of mine, in the podcast community, and I said, what should I do? And he goes, what should you do? And I said, yeah. And he said, meaning what? And I said, should I do it anyways? And he goes, it's Mark Wahlberg. Yes, interview him. I can't believe you're even considering saying no. So yeah, it went well though. And in fact, there's a filmmaker who told me, he said, the fact that Mark Wahlberg made some happy talk with you at the end says that it went well, and that Mark will tell them, hey, the next time I'm doing something, let's make sure that guy is on the list to do something. Because at the end, I said, Mark, final question, blah, 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 blah. He answered it. And I said, okay, thanks so much. Appreciate you doing this. And he's like, oh man, we didn't even get to talk about what you're doing and who your teams are. Next time we do this, I'll ask the questions and you can tell me. And so that's what this guy was referring to, that told me, he said, Bruce, that's a good sign that Mark liked you. And I'm like, all right, cool.
Very cool. Very, very cool. You got to get, what's his name on there? The Passion of the Christ. Who's that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple people. Jim Caviezel is who you're referring to.
No, I was talking about the other guy, the director.
Oh, Mel Gibson?
Yeah.
But see, a lot of people will throw names out. A lot of people will throw names out, and I always say, okay, let's make sure that they have a sports connection. Or if it's the other way around, let's make sure that they're Catholic. The one I always get is people say, when are you going to have Tim Tebow on? And I say, Tim Tebow's not Catholic. So you wouldn't interview him? No, I wouldn't. The show's called Catholic Sports Radio. It's not Christian Sports Radio.
Well, this is an interesting question. Is Mel Gibson Catholic, or is he in schism?
I believe he's Catholic, but I don't know that he has a sports connection.
Because I would suspect that he's in schism if he doesn't, if he opposes the Vicar of Christ. It's like,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's Catholic. But I don't know if I've ever looked into if he has a sports connection or not.
Well, maybe you should. But yeah, very, very cool and exciting. So, do you yourself? I'm not going to dwell on the music part, but do you yourself make music at all?
No, I pretend to play guitar a little bit, but no, I don't make music.
And what is with the Now Hear This? What's the story behind that?
Now Hear This is the company, and Now Hear This Entertainment is the podcast.
Oh, okay. And you came up with this name?
Yep, because when I started the company, it was, at the time, I used to only do music clients. And so it was kind of a play on words of Now Hear This, meaning what I have to say about this client who I want you to hear them.
But now you have primarily 2 podcasts or 3?
2 podcasts, but the business has expanded to where my clients are not just music. I have author clients, small businesses, entrepreneurs, actresses, filmmakers, things like that.
Oh wow, very exciting. So to hop back a little bit to the biographical stuff, I've completely forgotten most of what you've said, but I'm just going to ask you to talk a little bit about the siblings. Do you have siblings?
A brother and a sister, and a little baby brother in heaven.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, were they sort of on the same page? They remained Catholic on fire, or not so much, or what's the story?
Uh, my brother, I suppose. My sister, not anymore.
Okay,
Um, I know my parents aren't happy about that, but
yeah,
um, you know,
that's life.
that's yeah.
Well, the Catholic perspective. I kept thinking about this as you were saying, like, my guests have to be Catholic. They have to be Catholic, and I kept thinking in the back of my mind, well, I just want to throw this idea out there and see what you think about it. It's a Vatican II idea. Well, it's a Catholic idea. We're not allowed to condemn anyone to hell. People do go to hell, unfortunately, but we're not allowed to say, oh, this one or that one. Maybe Judas. Maybe we could say Judas went to hell. I don't know. But the people that don't go to hell, like the people that you meet in real life, they're going to end up in heaven or hell, but we can't say they're going to hell. So what can we say about them? We can say, well, if they don't end up in hell, they're going to end up in heaven. And to end up in heaven, you have to be Catholic. So what the church teaches about that is that there are three kinds of Christians. The first class Christians, they have the faith and they are in the state of grace. So I went to confession this weekend. So hopefully I'm in the state of grace. We can't know for sure. It's a dogma that we can't know for sure, but except by a special grace. But hopefully I'm in the state of grace and I have the faith. So that's first class Christian. The second class, they have the faith, but they're not in the state of grace. And we know how that happens when you do mortal sin. And the third class is the most interesting class of Christian. It's the potential Christian. It's the Christian that doesn't even have the faith, much less are they in the state of grace. So really, if you wanted to be silly, you could see every human as a potential Catholic. Like, okay, because I mean, you're not allowed to say that, oh, you're not Catholic, so you're going to hell. You can't say that. You're forbidden. So you have to see them that they're on a journey and they're going to make it to heaven. And the only way they can do that is by eventually, even if it's on their deathbed at their last breath, eventually saying yes to Mary and the papacy and everything that comes with being a Catholic. So what do you think about that thought experiment?
Well, for openers, I love that you cited three because I always say there's so many instances in the Bible where things happen in threes.
Uh,
And that story that I have about me being called to Catholic Sports Radio has that element to it of
uh,
threes. And not coincidentally, I always say that for Catholic Sports Radio, I envision three potential listeners. That would be people who have completely fallen away from church. They're Catholic, they've completely fallen away from the church, but they just don't go. And I always say that maybe they'll listen to Catholic Sports Radio and say, I need to start going back to church. And if that's what it takes, the sports angle, then thank you, God, for using me as the vehicle to get these people to go back. The second category is the people who go every Sunday to Mass, but they just kind of go just to check the box and say that they went. And maybe they listen to Catholic Sports Radio and they say, okay, I need to really get dialed in and engage with the Mass and pay attention. And as long as I'm going to be there, really be there for a reason other than saying that I went. And the third group, I always say, is the people who are totally on fire for their faith. And maybe they hear my podcast and they say, I'm going to go even further. Maybe they join a ministry or whatever. Now, all that being said, I do say you don't have to be Catholic to listen to it because it's not like you're going to listen to it and not understand what we're talking about. We don't get so into the weeds on the catechism or things like that people are going to go, I'm not Catholic. I have no idea what these people are talking about. And they hit the stop button.
Inside baseball type of stuff, this controversy, and this bishop said that, and the other bishop said that, and it's like, even I
Yeah.
don't like listen to that. Even I don't want to listen to that.
Yeah, exactly. But can I tell you the story about
Yeah,
getting called to
yeah,
Catholic Sports
of
Radio?
course,
Because
yeah.
I think what's interesting about this story, David, is it's really a doubting Thomas story because there's going to be people in your audience who are going to hear this and they're going to go, I don't know about that. I think this guy is using his imagination. And that's kind of those things where that's why I love doing my show is people telling their stories of things that happened to them. And you can choose to believe it or not. But if you find yourself being that, until I put my hand in his side, I'm not going to believe, then maybe there's something bigger here than just, whether you like this guest or this podcast or not. So my story was I was working in the Olympic movement and I was on a business trip down in Brazil. Now I already knew that when I was going to get back from that trip that I was going to put in my 2 weeks notice because I was going to go off and there was going to be this startup that I was going to do with this other guy that sadly ended up falling through, and I won't say any more than that. But the point is that because and it was a Catholic based endeavor that we were going to do. So that part you do need to know. So here I already had my mind made up that I'm going to get back from this business trip. I'm going to put in my 2 weeks notice, and I'm going to go and do this and serve the Lord through this new initiative. So there I was on this boat on the Amazon River, and all the people that were part of this thing all seemed to be going up on the top deck. And I was sitting below, and I thought, everything is fine down here. I don't understand why these people are all going up there. Like, what's the big deal? I'm looking out the window. Everything looks pretty cool. And finally, curiosity got the best of me, and I said, okay, I'm going to go up there and see, what all the hubbub is that everyone's going up there. And I'm one of the only people left down below. So I get up there and I go, oh gosh, wow. Well, the the view is much better from up here. And all of a sudden it's just even more beautiful than it already was. So I kind of take a seat by myself, and I'm cruising down the Amazon River on this boat. And all of a sudden there's just like such peace and stillness and calm about me that the Holy Spirit comes to me and says, Bruce, look all around you. What do you see? And I think, water. Oh, water. Wow. Because there's so much about water in the Bible that, wow. And I mean, I knew that that's what this was that was happening. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this doesn't happen to someone like me. Why is this happening right now? So I thought that was really moving, and okay, enough is enough. I just kind of thought, that was pretty impactful, and I'll just leave it at that. And before you know it, this voice, the Holy Spirit, whoever comes to me again, and says, Bruce, what's your favorite Bible verse? And I thought, well, that's easy. It's the one where the apostles are in the boat, the water's getting in, they wake up Jesus. He gets them out of it, and he says, guys, didn't you have faith? And I thought, well, that's kind of apropos that here I am on this boat, right? And I'm having this moment with the Holy Spirit. And then the third one is, it occurs to me, throw down your nets, let's go be fishers of men. And I think that's what I'm about to do. I'm about to throw down this net that was my job in the Olympic movement for the 10.5 years, and all the job security and the benefits and everything that go with it. And I'm going out into this startup that's a Catholic initiative. So 3 things there that was something way back then, but I never lost that idea. And that was going to be, kind of related to the same thing as what Catholic Sports Radio is, the mix of faith and sports. I never lost that idea, even though that thing ended up not really lasting even so much as a year. And so it got to be 2018, the latter part of 2018, and I finally resurrected the idea to implement as a podcast. And that's when I told you the story before about bringing this to my wife and telling her this is what I want to do, is start up this podcast. And it's all because of that intervention on the boat in the Amazon River in September 2012.
Wow, amazing. So, I've interviewed probably around 300 guests, but I've been doing it very part-time. I work full-time, and it's just a hobby for me, okay? But, the most interesting thing, one of the main things I'm looking for is to meet people, hear their story, get inspired, and these sorts of things. There are many, many benefits to doing a podcast, obviously. But one of the things I'm looking for is to discover my own strengths and weaknesses, and what can I learn. So I'm just wondering if you've been challenged, like for example, I'll give you an example. Like, I meet holy people who are not Catholic, and then I'm just like, well, I am Catholic and I'm not holy, but they're not Catholic, but they are holy. And practicing a lot of virtue, including the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. So it's like, I want to be a triumphalist, like, Christ and his church are one, and there's no salvation possible outside of the church, and so on and so forth. I do believe that, and Vatican II teaches that. But at the same time, Vatican II teaches that there are elements, saving elements, Catholic elements, outside of the visible boundaries of the church, and that our brothers and sisters in all kinds of different faiths, they have a lot to offer, in terms of inspiration, in terms of example. So it's sometimes it's very challenging, it's very humbling. So I'm just wondering if you can relate to that, and sort of the tension that exists where you think, well, we don't want to say Catholics are better, because we know they're not. The saints are better. The saints are better. But your average Catholic and your average Hindu, maybe you struggle to see a pattern that one's better than the other. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. But what do you think about that?
No, you said exactly what I feel, which is that there is inspiration still to draw from these people. I mean, I've been around some people that I'm very, very close with who are not Catholic, and we still bond together because of our love of God. We still bond together because we're devoted Christians. We know that at the end of the day, we're going to go our separate ways as it relates to what church we're going to go to. But that doesn't mean that I can't sit there. There's someone in particular, she's 75 years old, and she's this sweet Southern Christian lady who is just so devoted to her faith that I kind of, for all intents and purposes, I'm holding up air quotes, hang on her every word, because she is so steeped in her faith that I know that this is someone that I can learn some lessons from. And at the same time, she also walks the walk and talks the talk, because she'll sit there and she'll give you some real nice spiritual insight. And then you do see her go out and demonstrate that in all the things that she does. You know, there's someone who I had as a client that for many years, we just became the best of friends. She ended up standing up in my wedding, and she was always devoted to her faith. And there would be a time or two where she'd be about to perform somewhere that she'd be so nervous. She would come to me and she'd say, "Can we pray really quick?" So, you know, all of a sudden you're in a music environment, and what do you go back to? You just always go back to your faith. So there are certainly situations where you're going to run into people that, now you talked about it before, you know, early on, the people that are really extreme, and you just say, okay, look, you know, this person and I don't see eye to eye. And those conversations are going to be short. You know, hopefully for you, it's not someone who's on your podcast, but those conversations are going to be short, and, you know, you're just going to kind of go your separate way and not judge. Just understand that, you know, look, these people, this person and I, you know, have very, very different religious ideas. And it's not somebody that I want to really fellowship with anymore. But you don't think anything less of them. You don't wish ill will upon them. You just realize that, okay, this is someone that I'm probably not going to draw any inspiration from, and I'm not going to seek, you know, to
Right.
communicate with on a regular basis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the thing about me is, because I was atheist for 25 years, uh, I, I make a strong connection between me as an atheist, me as a Christian, and a Catholic. It's the same guy. It's the same guy. I'm the same guy. So I interview a lot of atheists, and I value what they have to say. I value, especially if they love the truth. A lot of them elevate reason and science and these sorts of things. They have a misguided approach to reason and science and these sorts of things. But they have a naive love, an immature love of truth. It's imperfect, just like I had. So I think I'm very, very sincere when I listen attentively, even to an atheist, even to a Satanist, because I was a Satanist before I became a Catholic. I was an atheistic Satanist, but I was a Satanist nonetheless. So I think that the corny idea of the journey, it may sound hackneyed, but it's true. Like, it really is true. And so that's why we have to we have to be delicate with human beings, no matter where they're at, you know. And I think about Pope Francis and the way he emphasizes that being with accompanying people wherever they're at. Uh,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
read my mind, because a lot of times it comes down to something as simple as, and I know this is so overused, but if you think of what would Jesus do, right? You think of, let the one among you who is without sin be the one to cast the first stone. And I think that's a great thing to apply when you are in a moment where you say to yourself, you know, boy, this person has really, really, really different religious beliefs than I do. So I'm not going to condemn them. I'm just not going to really interact with them going forward. And I think Pope Francis has done such a wonderful job during his papacy of really, really, and that's not to say that the popes before him have not, but I think he has been so visible with things that people think are radical, when at the end of the day, it's really him just saying, can't we all get along? And I think he very much mirrors a lot of Jesus's lessons that, for whatever reason, haven't been as visible with popes in the past. I think that Pope Francis has been so committed to looking at everybody the way that Jesus would, and not putting any kind of label or not shunning someone or condemning them or letting them be an outcast because of some label that society might want to put on them. And that's, as we all know, that's very, very challenging.
Mhm.
But, my hat goes off to Pope Francis for the way that he has continued consistently with that approach.
Yeah, what I look for in a Christian, more than, book knowledge or even a rigorous schedule of check marks, check, 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 prayer and the sacraments, whatever, because I have that. I have a check mark. I keep a spiritual journal. I'm keeping track of everything I do, prayer and the sacraments. And I know that's not where it's at. Like, that's a component, but that's not the be all and end all. For me, what I look for is innocence, purity, and like to be childlike in your faith. Do you love God? Do you trust God? Because that's where it's at, and that's what I see in Pope Francis, and that's what I see in a lot of the saints, frankly.
Well, and when we look ourselves in the mirror, those are kind of the things that we have to evaluate. I've said on Catholic Sports Radio, if you're somebody who goes to mass on a Sunday morning and then you come home and you turn into this raging lunatic in the afternoon because your football team is losing a game, well, there's a problem there, and that's kind of
Yeah,
a
you picked
large
the
part
wrong
of what.
football team. That's the problem.
But that's a large part of what my ministry is built around, is the fact that sports are great. There's a lot of wonderful benefits to it, things like physical fitness, teamwork, good sportsmanship, but we worship God and God alone. We don't worship sport. And so I think if we look at ourselves, and whether it's an actual checklist you're writing down or just some kind of self-audit, as I like to call it, and you find out that you have all these priorities on all these worldly things, and spending eternity in heaven is not on your list, or it's literally way down near the bottom, then it's time to reorder your priorities.
Absolutely, yeah. We are going to wrap it up here because I got to go and be with my wife in between this interview and the next. But I want to just get your idea of the saints, because we've touched briefly on the saints here. I usually ask my Catholic guests what their top three favorite saints are, but I don't allow you to say Mary, because everyone's going to say Mary. That's just a waste of a space, because everyone's going to say Mary. So, who are your top three, just off the top of your head?
I mean, I feel obligated to say Timothy, just because he was
Ah,
my confirmation saint.
ah,
Um,
okay. What
there's
age were you confirmed? What age were you confirmated?
that would have been age
Sevenish.
13.
Okay. Okay.
Um, there's a saint, and this is going to give away my age. My memory is really starting to slip on me, and it really upsets me when it does. Particularly now, there's a book that my spiritual advisor had recommended to me. I'm pretty sure it's called My Cousin the Saint. It's been a number of years since I read it. He's a rather obscure saint from Italy. Had just a really, really amazing story. And I'm sorry that I'm not putting my finger on his name. And third might be St. Augustine. Um,
Ah,
you know, yeah, I mean, I read the Confessions of St. Augustine. This sounds really commercial, but I live just a few hours away from St. Augustine, Florida.
ah,
And so, you do have a greater awareness of him because of that. I'm supposed to throw in honorable mention for St. Benedict, because I'm a Benedictine oblate to the St. Leo Abbey here in Central Florida. But the real fact of the matter is, David, that I think I have found, yes, certainly through hosting Catholic Sports Radio, but I think there's such a greater awareness nowadays for the saints. And I think people are seeking out some of the lesser known saints. And I think people are going to saints for intercessory prayer a lot more. I was in the hospital a few weeks ago, and I
oh,
came out of it and I started recovering. And for some unknown reason, I all of a sudden started losing my voice. And so I was pleading with people, please pray to Saint Blaise for his intercession for my voice to come back. So I think it's important, that we do go to the saints and ask them to intercede and recognize them and learn from them. The fact that, as the saying goes, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future.
yeah. While you were speaking, I was listening, but I was also Googling it. It's Padre Gaetano Catanoso.
Yep. Yep.
Good Italian name.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
It's a really good book.
I'll check out the book. Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's on Kindle. Yes, it is on Kindle. Okay. Still a bit pricey. $14 for a Kindle? Come on, that's a bit much. It's a bit expensive. That's
All I can do is recommend it. I
it's
got nothing
a
to do with the
it's
price.
a penance. It's a penance. Not a big deal. Oh, one of the saints said he asked someone because someone was struggling in their faith, and he said, "Well, give alms." And he's like, "Well, I already give alms." And he's like, "Well, give more." You know, give more. You know, you're supposed to feel it, right? You're supposed to feel it
Yeah,
when you give. You're supposed
yeah,
to feel it in the sense that it's like you're depriving yourself. Like so you have to give more.
yep,
You know,
yep. Well said.
like the 2 pence or whatever that woman put in. It was everything. She gave
Yeah.
everything. So I really like Saint Augustine. He was going to be my confirmation saint at age 39 in
Mm.
2009. So just gave my age away. I'm 53. But yeah, the Blessed Virgin Mary came to me allegedly in a dream, and she said, "No, you're not going to take the name Saint Augustine. You're going to take my name, Mary. So I'm David Mary."
Wow.
So was that a vision or just a silly dream? I don't know, but I'm very happy to have it either way. I'll find out on Judgment Day if it was a real if it was real. I'm not worried about it. It's like I don't want to say I don't care because I'd prefer that it was a
Yeah.
mystical thing, but I don't want to
Yeah, but
be proud and say like, yeah, Mary came to me. But it would be
yeah,
cool.
you
It would be
didn't
cool.
you didn't do something offensive. So even if it wasn't a vision, it's
Right.
not like you did something you shouldn't have done.
Yeah. Taking on a girl's name, very trendy these days for men to take on a girl's name. Some of my non-Catholic family thought it was strange. What, David Mary? What? Are you gay now? Like what? But it's a beautiful thing. I told you you're not allowed to pick Mary as one of your top three saints, but maybe just to wrap up, say a few words about Our Lady and what she means to you and your daily devotions. Do you pray the Rosary and other prayers to Mary?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's another awareness that I have seen from so many of my guests is such a great devotion to Mary and to the Rosary and men and women alike. I mean, no pattern whatsoever. Men just as much as women. There was a podcast that I was interviewed on where it's not really a podcast, an interview podcast. It's let's pray the rosary together. And then at
Oh,
the end, we'll talk about you and who you are and your faith
uh-huh.
journey and stuff. And we talked about things like the rosary because we had just prayed it. And I said that I still have the rosary from when I made my first communion as a little boy. And so that's very special to me.
Mm,
My mother's name is Rosemary
mm, mm.
because she was born on September 8th, which is the
Uh-huh.
Blessed Virgin's birthday. So there's a lot of connections to it for
Uh-huh.
me, for sure.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Do you uh do you have a favorite parish that you go to, or do you always go to the same one, or do you hop around, or what?
Interestingly, my wife and I just moved a couple
Okay.
months ago, and I had been going to the same parish for, gosh, I guess it would be about 21 years, I want to say. Yeah, so it's a change. Now the silver lining has been that the parish that we're now going to, it's very, very, very small. The only priest who is
Ah.
there, he used to be at the church that I used to go to.
Oh, no
So
way.
there's that comfort of seeing a familiar face up on the altar. Now that being said, I do go to the St. Leo Abbey on the first Sunday of every month for Oblate Sunday.
Okay.
So it's nice to kind of have that different experience. But you know, changing church is just, it's not unlike what the guests tell me on Catholic Sports Radio, especially the people that change jobs so much in sports and changing parishes along the way. It's a unique experience, but you still get the comfort of knowing it's the same mass that's being delivered at the parish you used to belong to and the one that David Ross is going to.
Yeah. Do you have a quick story about confession where you went in maybe a little bit trepidatious or burdened or worried or whatever or embarrassed, and then you came out just floating on air? Do you have a story like that? I like my listeners to hear these stories.
Yeah, I do. There's a guest priest who would come and this is kind of ironic when I tell you that the parish that I belonged to up until a couple months ago was the largest parish in the diocese. it was more the need for how many priests do you have to accommodate that many parishioners who are coming in, say for a parish, let's say Lenten penance service. And so they would get priests from quote unquote all over the diocese to come and help out. And so unless you really went out of your way to say, oh, well, I'm going to go to that confessional or to that seat over there because it's someone from here that I want to go to, it was just kind of a case of you're going to go into the confessional and whoever's in there is in there. And I do remember, as you said, walking in one time and, you know, nervousness as I think you go into with confession more times than not. And gosh, this priest who was in there, he, I believe, is, when I say Irish, I mean like has the Irish accent, like is probably, you know, from Ireland, and just was so kind and gentle and loving and just made me feel so comfortable. But oh my gosh, talk about feeling renewed. And you always feel renewed when you walk out of confession, but his style was just so comforting that you never go in there thinking, I hope this priest doesn't condemn me or really make me feel horrible for the sins I'm about to confess. But he couldn't have been any further from that. It was somebody that you go, I want to go to this priest every time. Like, what parish does he belong to? Because, you know, what a nice experience he made confession out to be. That if you look at it from the standpoint of maybe there are people who go, right, because a lot of times you'll hear your pastor up on the altar saying, okay, so, you know, we're going to be having our parish Lenten service, and I've instructed all the other priests to be here that night. And don't forget, you know, there's people who are going to be coming for the first time. I've heard confessions from people that say, Father, I haven't been here in 30 years. So think of those people who haven't gone to confession in 10, 20, 30 years, and they get this guy that I'm referring to.
Wow.
That person's going to come back 3 months later, not 30 years later.
Wow. Yeah, it's so amazing. You know, I often think about the patience of God, you know, in many contexts, but one of them is just, you know, God knows everything, but he also knows that everyone needs the sacraments, and to get the Eucharist we need confession, and it's such a beautiful thing, and it's free. I mean, you know, we have to support the church financially, yeah, but I mean, it's not expensive, you know, and no one's policing it, right? So when I say it's free, I mean it's you can make it happen. Like if you've been away from the sacraments, you can make it happen, and no one's gonna hold a gun to your head to make it happen. And I'm not pressuring anyone, but I'm just saying, like, God knows how good it is, how good His church is, how good the sacraments are, you know, to come back to life and to be sustained in life and to be nourished. And there should be lineups at every church. Our churches should be packed. So that's why I think about the patience of God when He knows how good it is, and people would rather watch porn and sports or whatever.
Well, you know, I think, and just to come full circle, I know you said we got to wrap it up, but, you know, I think if people listen to my podcast and they hear some of these guests that they kind of stargaze at, and these are some high profile people, and they consider what you just said, they consider the fact that this person is walking into a confessional for the sacrament of reconciliation the same way that I am. Yes. I mean, priests go to confession because we're all sinners. And so, you know, you mentioned before about combat sports, Boss Rutan, he's an MMA Hall of Famer. He was on my podcast.
No way.
And I think there's people that probably look at someone like Boss and they go, oh my gosh, MMA Hall of Famer. And they have him on this pedestal way up here. And guess what? He's stepping into the sacrament of confession the same way that you and I are. He's got sins that he wants to be forgiven for the same way you and I do. So why wouldn't you do it? What would stop you from, okay, you want to be like your idols? Boss Rutan goes to confession. Why don't you consider going to confession too?
Wow, he was always one of my favorites. Nice guy too.
Yeah.
Please invite him onto my podcast for the love of God. Please put me in touch with him. And how many minutes did he give you?
Oh, I know he gave me the full, you know, I usually aim for 25 or 30 minutes, and I know he gave me the full time.
Did he make you laugh out loud?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Really nice guy.
Nice guy. Yeah. He's known for the kidney attack, and he's really good fight. He was a really good fighter back in the day. And so I really appreciate meeting you.
Likewise.
I hope you come back. My schedule is jam-packed because of PodMatch. until Christmas. But in the new year, hopefully you'll come back and we'll chat some more
Thank you.
about. We can
Thank you.
talk about the Bible. We could talk about, there's so many things to dig into and to just talk about, and what you're getting up to. Do you have any future plans, big expansions, like new things or a book or anything?
I guess I'll give you a little bit of an exclusive. I do have a vision for putting out a book that would be a collection of the ministry moment segment that I do on every episode every week. I do the welcome and the housekeeping notes about the show. And then after I'm done with that, but before I start interviewing the guest, I do this segment that's 60 seconds, 75 seconds, 90 seconds long, where I am mixing faith and sports. More times than not, I'm pulling a passage from the Bible. But I think it would be kind of a nice devotional book for people to have, instead of saying, gee, I just found this podcast and I like this ministry moment segment that he does, but they're not about to go all the way back and go episode by episode by episode to say, where did he say it? What did he say? Let me write it down and then go to the next one. So I think it would be nice to have as a collection that you can just open to any day and read for a little bit of inspiration if you like that concept of mixing faith and sports.
Very cool. Many run the race, but only one wins the crown. This is one of the ones you've used many times, I'm sure.
Yep.
So I'm going to start coughing here, but take good care. I do I do want you to pray for me and mine. And I do enroll each and every guest in a perpetual mass. You're going to get a lot of graces coming your way, extra graces.
Wow.
Do with them what you will.
Wow.
It applies to you and your family. So that's parents, siblings, children, living or dead. And those graces are going to go till the end of time. So if, God forbid, you end up in purgatory, it'll make your stay a little bit nicer there and quicker.
Wow. Thank you. Great to meet you, David.
Yeah,
Thank you
excellent.
for having me on.
I hope we'll talk again soon. And
Likewise.
God bless you and yours, okay?
Same.
Take good care.
You too.
Bye-bye.